Sportscaster Jim Gray, who's with Fox, Showtime, and Westwood One Radio, interviewed Tom Brady last week after the report was published. He joins us now on the phone. Jim, good to have you.
Thanks, Jeff. Good to talk to you.
Based on what you heard from Tom Brady last week, were you surprised by the punishment?
I am surprised. I personally feel, that he's been overpunished. And, he has said he had nothing to do with it. And if you read the 270-plus page report by Ted Wells, it comes to no definitive conclusion that these balls were deflated. And if you look at the gauge that was taken by Walt Anderson, they're 2/100ths out of compliance on the 11 footballs. So, it just seems like we've gone through a whole big investigation, and there's been so much made of this, and now $1 million fine and draft picks and Brady getting suspended here for 4 games. Jeff, it just seems, because the commissioner was involved with domestic violence and got that so wrong, and there was such an error in judgment, it seems like what's happened here now is let's overpunish and let's go in that route so nobody can say that I didn't think that this was serious and didn't take care of it right. And then if it gets thrown out or overturned on appeal, which I believe it will, because the commissioner and the NFL have lost the appeal to Ray Rice, they've lost the appeal to Adrian Peterson, and I don't think we can equate people who are being accused of child abuse and people who have domestic violence to somebody who has 2/100ths of a ball out of compliance on PSI when 6 months ago nobody even knew what it was, PSI.
Duly noted, Jim, that there's a difference between underinflated footballs and domestic violence. But doesn't this punishment more speak to the way Brady acted after some of this information was presented to him, and that he didn't cooperate with investigators to the extent that they wanted him to, and he didn't release these phone records or provide information to them?
Well, I think that's right. But what's the standard here, Jeff? What should it be? There was no subpoena. There was no deposition. There was no criminal violation. So does that mean now that the NFL at will can now approach and demand and say, I want all of your emails and text messages, and then there has to be compliance? There was tremendous pressure on Brady by the Players Association not to turn over all of that, because then anything that happened beyond that, the league would say, well, Tom Brady gave it to us. So, look, I would think that these issues of privacy and these issues, yes, I guess that if you wanted to go ahead and prove and show that you didn't have anything to do with this, that you would say, okay, go look at it. But, good Lord, he's one of the big superstars in our country. He's married to a supermodel. I seriously doubt that any of us in that position would want to be turning over our telephone and letting people sift through it.
Well, you don't have to turn everything over, of course, but then if you don't turn anything over, then you can't necessarily complain as much about the fine or the punishment, correct? Because you weren't necessarily cooperating. And the question now, it would seem, becomes, one of them is, if you're going to appeal, don't you have to provide some sort of evidence to back up that appeal? And in this case, would it be turning over records that he didn't want to turn over before?
I can't answer that, Jeff. I have no idea what he will do, and I can't be in a position of knowing what he's thinking. I would say this. I would just turn over that 273-page document to somebody independent, somebody who has not been paid by the league upwards of $40 million to conduct investigations and deal with the league on concussion issues, and say, here, where's the smoking gun, independent arbitrator? Where's the definitive proof? Where do you find that I ordered, that I asked, that I did anything that would suggest that I told anybody at any time to take these balls to be out of compliance? I don't know where you see that in there. By the way, 3 of the 4 balls that they tested for the Colts are out of compliance too, and that's okay?
Yeah.
Come on. It just seems to me that if you're just objectively observing this, that there's a lot of flaws and problems with this.
Agreed, there's no smoking gun, but there are, it would seem, an extraordinary number of details and text messages in this report. And yes, it's all circumstantial evidence, but it seems like there's a lot of circumstantial evidence.
Well, they're pointing to a game against the Jets, I think, is the biggest circumstantial evidence, where the referees, for whatever the reason, and I don't know the full story, I only know what's in the report, where the referees took the balls that were given to them by the Patriots and they inflated them beyond, like up to 16 PSI. Mm-hmm. And the day after or the day of the game or whatever, Tom went in there or Tom texted and said, you know, those balls were like concrete. They were like rocks. What's the matter with you guys? They wrote him back or responded by saying, you know, the referees basically, you know, I don't know if we can say this on digital, they screwed us and they overinflated the balls. So that was the language that was used in there. And he said, well, yeah, but we turned in the balls the way we want them. Why did you let them do that? So he was giving them a hard time for what league officials had done and the game officials had done to take the balls and overinflate them. So now all of a sudden they say that because there are those text messages and that there is that communication, and he was hard on them at that time, that they then going forward, and a lot of it is just jock talk in a locker room, how they communicate with each other. You know, they get on Brady and they give him a hard time, and, you know, they aren't real pleased with the way that he handled it with them. So now they kid each other, or kidding on the level, or maybe they're cheating. I don't know. I can't speak to their intent. But they're taking it off of, Jeff, something where the league took the balls themselves and overinflated them. Seems to me that that's an awful long stretch in a reach to try and now say that what happened all the way back then against the Jets is now occurring in the championship game. But it doesn't look good, and there is no explanation for a man walking into a restroom with the balls. There's also no explanation for the protocol of the National Football League, which the commissioner has yet to address. Whoever thought it was a good idea to certify balls by an official and then turn them back over to non-league officials? Whoever thought it was a good idea to have that protocol? I mean, that's ridiculous.
Well,
and
right.
Also,
I mean, so moving forward, I mean,
Walt Anderson says in that report he can never remember the balls being out of his sight. This after he was tipped off. The league was tipped off by the general manager of the Colts, Jeff, the day before the game, that there was a problem with the inflation of these balls. And then the referee lets the balls out of his sight before the game. I mean, come on.
Well, that would seem to be the simplest solution to all of this in the future, right? Just let the NFL handle all of the footballs all of the time.
I would think so. I mean, you would think they would make that change immediately, and you would think that if the league is going to participate in what Brady's agent has called a sting operation, you know, why would you want to play half the game with balls that were out of compliance? Why wouldn't you, if you know what's going to happen, why would you want half the game to be compromised going to the Super Bowl? Yeah. I mean, does that make any sense to anybody?
Jim Gray, from Mayweather Pacquiao to Tom Brady, you've been a you've been a busy man. We appreciate your thoughts and comments here tonight, Jim. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Unfortunately, I think we're just beginning this. It's not over.
I would agree with that. Talk to you soon, Jim.
Thank you, sir.
We have now gotten a statement from Patriots owner Bob Kraft about the punishments handed out. He says, quote, "Despite our conviction that there was no tampering with footballs, it was our intention to accept any discipline levied by the league. Today's punishment, however, far exceeded any reasonable expectation. It was based completely on circumstantial rather than hard or conclusive evidence. We're humbled by the support the New England Patriots have received from our fans throughout the world. We recognize our fans' concerns regarding the NFL's penalties and share in their disappointment and how this one-sided investigation was handled, as well as the dismissal of the scientific evidence supported by the ideal gas law in the final report. Tom Brady has our unconditional support. Our belief in him has not wavered."